Latte, you know that we wanted to just have an outlet a space where we could talk about all the things that we end up talking about throughout the day when
Yeah.
we morning
Yeah.
meeting. And you recently posted something that comes up all the time for us about simple and the idea of simple. And Monica is always saying in our morning meetings that Mark Twain quote that was like, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead. So you recently posted about simple as an outcome. And I was like, but go tell me simple. What is it? What is it not?
It's funny because I get assigned by clients. And usually it's new clients until I've actually had a chance to kind of educate them on the fact that simple, we'll get there. We will get to simple, right? That's what I end up kind of starting with. We will get there, all right? But this idea that you can start there is probably a mistake because there are a lot of variables, there are a lot of factors that are going to pull in that are going to influence what we're building together. And so, yes, it's great that you want a simple result, but trust me in that you don't get to do that along the process because the process is sometimes a little bit chaotic, or as one of my colleagues used to say, chaotic, right? It's a little bit messy. And it's not because we as design professionals aren't professional in our process. It's just that the magic happens through the process, through iterations, through going through the steps. And whether you're really process oriented and you have something that's objectively a process, you can say, well, first we do research and then synthesis and blah, blah, blah. Or you're much more kind of a little bit more fluid in your process. You still have one and you use it and it helps you get to the end result. But to think that you can shortcut and get all the way to the thing that is ultimately simple is it's just an error in perception. It's kind of like saying to a doctor in an exam room, when you go in and you have something that might be happening in your gut, can you just tell me what the answer is?
Oh, I do
Right?
that though. Like so.
You want to know the answer. You want to, right?
Yeah.
You want to know the answer. You want to know what the answer to the solution, the answer to the problem is, but you don't get to shortcut the process because the elegance of the solution comes through the exercise, comes through the exploration.
You have like a statement, simple in design doesn't exist. Is that, do you really believe them?
Oh, no, no. Simple can be something that you get to as a result of the design process, but you don't get to start there. It's an outcome. It comes at the end. Now, I've had clients, and you probably have had this happen too, where they'll come in and they'll say, this is what I want. I want specifically this, right?
Yeah.
And if you do that, you're going to give them a solution that they've asked for. But trust me, it's going to be a short-changed solution because it's just the thing they had in their head and they wanted to visualize it, right? That's the short way to think about. But what I would say is that especially if it is an involved project that has a lot of different elements, you're not going to end up with something that's tiny in its response. It's going to end up being complex. Okay. And that's another thing. So, the difference between complex and complicated. You start with complicated, right? I don't know. I mean, for anybody that's ever been to a farm where the farm is kind of disheveled. I grew up on a farm, so I can say that I know what it looks like to have a disheveled farm versus an organized farm. And entropy is really at play. Yeah. So if hay is everywhere, the animals are running out of the gate, that's complicated, right? That's a complicated mess. Now, you can have that same farm with all of the same things, hay, sheep, horses, you name it, and it can be complex. It can actually be really, really well organized, and that means that it's been solved for. And that is a result, and that is simple in the end. So I'm talking a lot, but that's how I think about it. You can have a simple, small solution. You can have a simple, complex solution, and they're both simple, but they come through the process.
We always laugh about what it is in your process that gets you to that point. Maybe it's not always simple, but gets you to the desired solution that you were hoping for, and whether or not you have to cry or try to take naps for 2 weeks, or if there's somebody specific that you call who Like for me, and I'll call my father and ask him to help me with the solution. And then when he can't help me with it, I'm like, "Ah, you're no help." And I hang up and then I get a spark and an idea. And the various things like along the way that are required, even just like time to sit and do nothing for that genius to come in. And when you have to rush, you kind of just throw everything at the problem, and it's a mess.
Well, it can be a mess in it, right? But despite the fact that it can be a mess in it, you can actually have some faith in the fact that at the end of it, you're going to end up with a result that works for people, that works for the system that you're solving for. And to be specific, that can be graphic design, that can be in product design, that can be in interior design, architecture, you name it. Anything where the word design is attached to it, if you trust in the fact that people are going to have, sometimes they're going to have a little bit of magic that comes about, and don't forget showers, right? You take a shower in the middle, and in the middle of it, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, right? And so that all exists. And it is part of, I'm using the word process a lot, but it is part of the way in which it happens. And that's how you get there.
Yeah.
And you just don't get to shortchange it.
So you've been designing for a really long time, though. I mean, like, what was simple when you first started? Do a lot of designers start with the idea that simple is easy? Or do you think if you're interested in design, you kind of understand that it's difficult to begin with? Or is that something you had to learn?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I don't want to, well, yeah, I'm probably going to misquote this, but there are people out there that have talked about this idea that you're going to be really bad for a really long time at whatever profession you choose to pursue. And that's really true of design too. Like you can go out and know what a really great car looks like, right? I mean, I happen to be a sucker for things like Tesla and, beautiful BMWs and things like that. I mean, I see it, and you can call me silly for thinking a Lamborghini is a beautiful thing. I think Lamborghinis are gorgeous, right? Those are gorgeous. And trust me, as a little kid, I used to make models of Lamborghinis all the time. I was just thinking about it the other day. I'd make these little clay models, and I'd make these wood models, and I'd present it and I'd be like, here's a Lamborghini. And if I was to truly be objective, it didn't look anything like a Lamborghini. I mean, it was a piece of balsa wood. The wheels were totally wrong. The paint job was terrible. Didn't look anything like it. But that's okay, because it was kind of that evolution in my thinking and just the careful practice and understanding that initially I know what it looks like to have something that's really great. But it's going to take me a long time to learn a bunch of things. Like, for instance, Lamborghinis aren't made of balsa wood, right? It just takes a long time to go through that process to acquire the skills that allows you to ultimately be able to say, yeah, I've landed at something really pretty, objectively pretty. There are the projects that I pursue today where I can say, yeah, if you want an app designed, I know how to make that for you. And it's taken a lot of time to learn all of those skills to be able to get to that point. So, along the way, yeah, it's super frustrating. It's you feel like you're banging your head against the wall when you're trying to pursue something that you really just don't understand, right? In depth. You think you do, but then you get into it and you
Sometimes
realize,
you don't. Like this whole conversation, I'm just thinking about me and thumbnails on Instagram. Like, I do video. Yay. I don't really make thumbnails in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm having to do it. And I feel like every time I'm working on one, I'm like, hey, Latte, can you check this out? And you look at it and you're just like, why is all this stuff happening here? And like, I'm very aware that simple in graphic design is something that I struggle to get to. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you'll take it and you'll literally just like, cut this out, cut that out. You'll come up with some idea that takes away all those extra layers. So you're right. It is something that takes time.
it does, because the truth is behind that effort that I might help you with on a thumbnail was a lot of time exploring a lot of very, very different ideas. And that was even before I actually studied design formally as an undergrad studying architecture, or as in grad school studying design. the reality is that there are a lot of theories that you have to understand. You have to understand how the human eye perceives, spacing and fonts, for instance. I mean, text fonts alone is a whole exercise. You can pursue years and years of study to understand how to use all aspects of fonts to do something really elegant. So I think it's great for anybody to try to pursue design. Just get started. It is one of those. It's not like medicine where just make some incisions on a body. You can't practice in that way on the human body, but you can in design. You can open up Illustrator and make a bunch of mistakes and in design. And one of the wonderful tools, or one of the wonderful keystrokes is undo and redo, right? And you can just explore a bunch. Simple when you see it. A simple, elegant solution, and that could be in the form of a logo, like the FedEx logo, with that arrow that shows up in the X. It's for a lot of people, they didn't even notice it until it's actually thrown at them, and they're like, do you see it now? Like, oh my God, how did they think of it? Amazon
and a smiley face, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think until like last year. I was like, oh, that way. Oh my gosh. And now every time I see it, I'm just like, wow, look at that. I'm still in awe. So, okay, so I'm a client and I want just simple. What do you say?
There's a graphic designer that I follow on Instagram. I'm sure there are a few of them that create logos specifically. And to try to help their clients navigate that, they just present one logo, right? One logo, and then they'll refine that logo. So they put in all their energy and effort into one logo, and then they have their entire business wrapped around that idea. You ask for a new logo, I'm going to give you one. We will refine that. That's a pretty good way of doing it. And now that's for a logo. I can tell you that that's not going to work with a complex product. So once again, there's that spectrum of a kind of a small project. Not to say that a logo is a small project, but an easily defined project where it's a new logo head, or a word type, versus, let's say, a new type of headset that connects to the body in some fashion. I'm actually working on this for a big project, and it involves a lot of very specific touch points on the human body, human factors, etc. When I've had conversations with that client and they say, well, we just want it to be simple. Like, well, that is going to come through really low kind of fidelity prototypes. We're going to do a lot of testing. We're going to actually have to figure out if the springs that attach parts of the ear are too tight or too loose. We're going to have to check the wires. They don't get simple at the beginning. That is just not in the equation. They don't get to have that, because the correct solution for different people is going to come at the end of the process. It does not get to come at the beginning. And so that's the result.
You kind of touched on designers starting out and discovering what simple is and working through and pressing undo and all that. I absolutely love that. What other actionable advice do you have for designers so that they can grasp an understanding of simple in the way that you define it, that simple is an outcome. It's not something that just is there.
Yeah, actually, I think the place that I ended up getting to around the term simple is, that's not what people really want. They really want elegant, okay? They really want the right solution, which is an elegant solution. Elegant can exist in a logo. It can exist in a product. It can exist in a system. Going to a city that is really beautifully designed, it's an elegant experience, right? So elegant is streamlined. Elegant in like, for instance, the Prius. You can knock the design of the original Prius, but in terms of its form factor, the reason why it had that shape was to minimize drag. That was an elegant solution for that aspect of the car. And so I think that's the big thing, is that what you're really aiming for is you're aiming for elegance in all the pursuits. And people really will respond to that. And that's what they're really looking to pay for That's what they're trying to pursue. That I think that's honestly what a lot of people, especially designers, that's what we're really trying to achieve. We're trying to provide elegant solutions for people, for systems, for individuals, for ourselves. So, take a few steps back, go for that walk, come back and work on the thing again. And sometimes you have to, finish the project. And it's like filmmakers will say that films are oftentimes abandoned, not finished. I would say that there is that balance there between that in design as well, where you could say, well, you could always put that extra little tweak on something. But at the same point in time, if you take a step back, when you've achieved something that feels good, feels elegant.
Yeah. Well, you're very easy to talk to, so this felt simple.